Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at Trump's nomination of Pam Bondi for Attorney General.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we're going to be basing this on a Washington Post article by Mark Berman and David Nakamura. Just came out a couple of days ago, November 23rd, 2024. Um, you know, I, I think the thing that's so interesting about this is that you have a president who's appointing someone who's very, very close to him
Right.
to lead the Department of Justice. So, yeah, what are your initial thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, right away, that raises some red flags, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of conflicts of interest, is this person going to be working for the American people, or are they going to be working for Trump?
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, there are definitely some concerns right off the bat.
Yeah, and so I think, kind of unpacking this a little bit, it's important to understand who she is and what her background is.
Right.
So, maybe you can walk us through a little bit about her history and her connection to Trump.
Yeah, so Pam Bondi, she served as Florida's Attorney General from 2011 to 2019.
Okay.
And her and Trump go way back.
Well, really?
Yeah, apparently they met in college. She's friends with his children.
Oh.
And she even endorsed him back in 2016 when he first ran.
Yeah.
So she's been a supporter from the beginning. And the interesting thing is she really didn't waver in that support,
Oh, wow.
even through, some of the most controversial periods.
Yeah.
So you've got the Russian investigation. You've got the first impeachment. You've got the 2020 election fraud claims. And even those 4 indictments that he's facing now, she's defended him through all of it.
It's amazing. That's pretty remarkable.
It is. It is. And in fact, there's even a quote in this Washington Post article where she says, the prosecutors will be prosecuted, the investigators will be investigated. So that kind of gives you an idea of where her loyalties lie.
So it's a very strong statement for sure. I'm curious from your perspective, what that kind of loyalty means in the context of the Attorney General. How does that play out when someone who's supposed to be the head of the justice system
Right.
has that kind of allegiance to someone?
I mean, the biggest concern there is she going to be able to remain impartial?
Right.
I mean, the Justice Department is supposed to be independent.
Right.
It's supposed to be free from any political influence.
Right.
But if you've got someone in there who has basically pledged their loyalty to a specific person,
Yeah.
it just creates that appearance of bias.
Yeah.
And even if it isn't actually biased,
Yeah.
the perception is enough to erode public trust in the justice system.
Right. Perception is reality in many ways.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous road to go down. If people don't trust the justice system,
Absolutely.
then the whole system starts to break down.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. We've established she's very close with Trump.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit about one particular controversy
Okay.
that kind of has been following her around, and that's the
Yeah.
Trump University case. So can you maybe give us some background on that?
Yeah. So back in 2013, Pam Bondi was actually considering joining a lawsuit against Trump University.
Okay.
And around that same time, Trump donated $25,000 to her political action committee, her PAC.
To her PAC. Wow.
And shortly after receiving that donation, she decided not to join the lawsuit.
Oh, interesting.
So, I mean, the timing there definitely raises some questions.
It does. It does. It sounds a little suspicious.
Yeah, and what's even more interesting is the IRS later ruled that that donation actually violated tax laws.
Really?
And Trump ended up having to pay a fine.
Wow.
So it wasn't just like a slap on the wrist. There were actual consequences for that donation.
Interesting. But she claims that there was no quid pro quo.
Right. She's denied any wrongdoing.
Yeah.
And actually, in this specific case, the Florida Commission on Ethics cleared her.
Okay.
But watchdog groups like CRU, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, they're still concerned.
Yeah.
They're still raising flags about potential conflicts of interest.
Right. It's a very sticky situation.
Yeah, very tangled.
Very tangled, yeah. So, I think what's interesting is that we have her denying any wrongdoing. We have the Florida Commission on Ethics clearing her.
Right.
But we also have these watchdog groups that are very, very concerned about potential conflicts of interest.
Right. I mean, and that just underscores the need for, really thorough vetting.
Yeah.
And transparency in these kinds of appointments.
Especially, I mean, this is a huge position.
Absolutely.
Attorney General, I mean, this is like the top law enforcement officer in the country. And now it seems like there might even be another conflict of interest that's emerging that involves her brother, Brad Bondi. Yeah. So what's going on with her brother?
So her brother, Brad Bondi, he's a lawyer, and he represented Elon Musk in a fraud case.
And, as we all know, the Justice Department's currently investigating Tesla.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So now you have a situation where her brother's representing Elon Musk, the Justice Department's investigating Tesla, and she's being nominated to be the head of the Justice Department.
Right, and it makes you wonder, is there some connection there?
Yeah, exactly. It makes you wonder if there's something going on behind the scenes
Yeah.
that maybe we don't know about. I mean, the article doesn't go into specifics, about connections, but it definitely raises the question of whether there should be more scrutiny. Especially when you're talking about someone who's going to be leading the Justice Department. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's a huge position.
It's huge. Yeah.
And these conflicts of interest, whether they're real or just perceived, it erodes the trust in the system.
Yeah, yeah. It makes people question the whole system.
Right, exactly. And so I think, shifting gears a little bit, the article also talks about how Matt Gaetz was actually initially considered for the Attorney General role.
Oh, wow.
But
Yeah.
then he withdrew
Mhm.
because of some of the controversies surrounding him.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? What do you think about, kind of the fact that Matt Gaetz was even in the running?
Well, it's an interesting comparison, right? I mean, you've got these two staunch Trump allies,
Yeah.
both very vocal in their support for him and his policies, but their styles are very different.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Gaetz is very much the bomb thrower.
Right. He's confrontational. He's in your face. I mean, he even at one point called for the FBI to be abolished.
Yeah, he's a firebrand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas Bondi, she at least presents herself as more measured.
Yeah, much more, sort of even-keeled.
Yeah.
Not so much in your face.
Yeah.
But still, as we've been talking about, her past actions and that unwavering support for Trump, that still raises concerns.
Right. It raises concerns about her ability to be impartial
Yeah.
and to really, uphold the law in a fair and unbiased way.
Right. It's almost like you have two sides of the same coin. You have the firebrand, and then you have the more subtle, but still very much a Trump loyalist.
Yeah.
And it just makes you think about, like, what is the future of the Justice Department going to look like?
Yeah.
What kind of a precedent does this set?
What does it say about the rule of law?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, is it more about political loyalty than it is about justice?
Yeah. That's a good question.
That's a very good question. And one that we, as citizens, we have to think about and we have to demand answers to.
Yeah.
I mean, the Washington Post's article is doing a great job of, laying out the facts
Yeah.
and raising these concerns.
Highlighting the issues.
But it's really up to us to, to grapple with this and to think about what kind of a country we want to live in.
Absolutely. I mean, we need to be aware of these potential conflicts of interest
Yeah.
and really understand what's at stake here and have these difficult conversations.
And I think, speaking of expectations, the article talks about how Trump wants Bondi to refocus the DOJ to its intended purpose of fighting crime. But a lot of people are interpreting that as basically code for, going after his enemies and protecting his allies.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a valid concern for sure.
So how do you interpret that?
Well, I think you have to look beyond the words.
Yeah.
And you have to look at actions.
Yeah.
And you have to look at her history. And you have to look at her relationship with Trump. And ask yourself, is she really going to be impartial?
Yeah.
Or is the Justice Department going to become basically a tool for political revenge?
It's scary to think about.
It is. It's a scary thought.
But I think it's important that we don't shy away from these uncomfortable questions.
Absolutely. We can't just ignore it and hope it goes away.
Because if the Justice Department, which is supposed to be the cornerstone of our legal system, if that becomes politicized,
Right.
that's a really dangerous road to go down.
That undermines the whole system.
Yeah. And so I think, this whole situation really underscores how vital a nonpartisan Justice Department is.
Absolutely.
It's not about, Democrats or Republicans.
That's about justice.
It's about justice.
Yeah.
And about ensuring that the law applies equally to everyone.
To everyone, yeah.
Regardless of their political beliefs.
Regardless of their connection.
Exactly. And we as citizens have to make sure that happens.
We have to hold them accountable.
And it's not just about, the big picture stuff. It's about those little details, those little connections.
Yeah.
The things that maybe aren't immediately obvious.
Right.
Those potential conflicts of interest. Like the article does a good job of digging into those, and that's what we're trying to do here too. Sort of unpack all that.
Connect the dots.
Exactly. And one thing that I found really interesting was how much the article emphasized the need for transparency
Yeah,
and the importance of thorough vetting.
absolutely. I mean, especially CROW, that watchdog group.
Yeah.
They were really pushing for those rigorous background checks.
Right. And it's like, we can't just take her word for it.
No, we have to look into
We have
them.
to really understand, what's going on.
What are the connections?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, all of this really comes down to this question. Can someone with such close ties to a former president be impartial?
Right.
I mean, that's the big question.
That's the million-dollar question.
And it goes beyond just Trump and Bondi, right? It's really about the integrity of our justice system.
It is. What do we as citizens expect from our leaders? What do we expect from our justice system?
Yeah, what do we value? So I think, as we wrap up here today, the big question that we want to leave you with is this. If the line between politics and justice becomes blurred, how can we as citizens ensure that everyone gets a fair shake?
Right.
How can we make sure that the system is actually just?
It's a tough question,
It is a tough question.
but it's one that we need to think about.
Absolutely. And so on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. But as always, we encourage you to keep digging, keep asking those tough questions, keep learning. Until next time, stay curious.
Because when you're in this country illegally and you're doing things illegally, I want to tell you, and you wind up in Polk County, Grady Judd is going to find you, the DEA is going to help them, and my statewide prosecutors are going to lock you up for as long as we can.
And we're going to enjoy it.
The agency who's investigating him and investigating him, wanting to lock him up forever, the FBI and the DOJ, they raided his home at Mar-a-Lago. The director of the FBI, after the first assassination attempt, said, oh, President Trump may have been hit by a piece of stray glass. We all know he was shot. And the head of the FBI in the Southern District of Florida, Dan, made vicious statements about the president that he had to remove from social media.
You can't help but be proud to call this country home. But for Joe Biden, it's been the land of opportunism, not opportunity. As a career prosecutor and former Attorney General of Florida, I fought corruption, and I know what it looks like, whether it's done by people wearing pinstripe suits or orange jumpsuits. At the Democrats' convention, we were told to look at Joe Biden as the model of integrity. But when you look at his 47-year career in politics, the people who benefited are his family members, not the American people.